All right, so this video is a follow-up to the Build Your Own SQL Fiddle with Docker and VS Code tutorial. And where we left off is we created a Dockerized Postgres database that we were able to query from inside our VS Code editor. Now, we took a few shortcuts along the way. We cheated by disabling password authentication on our Postgres database. So we're going to backtrack a bit in this video and see how we can set that up. Now, if you've looked at the docs I shared, you've probably already seen that by default, the Docker image is going to expect two environment variables. Well, one environment variable that's absolutely necessary, and that's Postgres password. We were bypassing that earlier, but we're going to go ahead and add it back in. And you can see in this second note that this variable defines the super user password, and by default, the Postgres user will be the super user, and it will be Postgres like it is by default in any Postgres instance that you use. So what we're going to do next is we're actually going to copy Postgres password, and we're going to go ahead and set it here in our compose file. We'll just change the value to change me. And what I want to do next is I want to do a quick exercise to show the different methods and tricks for handling environment variables in DockerCompose. Now, there's many ways to do this. I like the DockerCompose version of environment handling because it allows me to use bash syntax to set defaults. And what I mean by that is, let's say I have two environment variables. Let's just do var A and var B. Now, var A is going to be set on our local machine. So I'm going to export it, and I'm going to set the value to foo, right? Now if I echo var A, we can see that the value is foo. Var B is not going to exist on our local machine. We're just not going to set it. Now, what we can do in the compose file is we can use bash syntax to say that when the container is instantiated, we want it to take the value of var A, but if it doesn't exist, we want to default it to, in this case, 1. And this colon minus sign is the syntax to set a default. Meanwhile, we're going to do the same thing for var B. And remember that we never set var B locally. So var A should take the value of foo. This is what we set. Meanwhile, var B should take the value of 1 because that's what we specified to be the default. So I'm going to save this. Let's spin up our service and confirm that it's running. And now this time what we're going to do is we're going to enter the container through bash. So what we're going to do is do docker exec it for interactive, and we'll do pg fiddle, the container name, and we'll do bash. And now we're inside the shell, and we can actually echo our environment variables. So we'll do var A equal to foo, again, just like on our local machine. Then var B is equal to 1, just like we specified here as the default. So now, what's the point of all this? The point is that you don't want to set password values inside of a file, especially a file like this that is very likely going to be checked into GitHub and available publicly for many people to see. So we're going to go ahead and set this to an environment variable. And this time what happens is Docker is actually going to give me a warning. See, it's already giving me a warning when I'm spinning it down saying Postgres variable is not set. So I'm just going to set this here to do export change B, and then go ahead and spin up a container, do docker ps, and then do docker logs on pg fiddle, and system is ready to accept connections. So now we are back to our query editor, and we're actually about to hit a problem. So in our compose file, we turned off trust mode. Now our Postgres database is going to expect passwords for our users. And we've got a password for the super user, but remember we created a new user called Docker, and we created it without a password. So when we try to set a query here, I'll hit login. It's going to give me an error saying no password supplied. So how do we fix that? Well, one thing that we can do is we can simply add another variable. We'll just call this Docker password. And again, we'll set this to the value of Docker password. And I'm going to export it here. And I'm just going to set the value to Docker. All right, let's confirm that we're able to read it. And then I'm going to go back to my init user DB shell script, and I'm going to add a with password statement here. And I am simply going to read the environment variable from inside my SQL code in this shell script. So let's see if that works. I'm going to bring down the service. All right, I'm going to bring the service back up. Do a Docker PS, make sure it's running. And let's just do a quick sanity check on the logs here. And it looks like we're good to go. All right, so we're back in our query editor, and we're going to see if we can run it and execute query. I'm going to try without a password first, just to see if we, okay, looks like we're getting the same no password auth error. So let's try it one more time, and this time I'm going to put in just some random characters just to see what we get. Okay, fatal password authentication was wrong, so let's try one more time, and this time put in the correct password, which we set on our local machine as an environment variable, and that's going to be Docker, and it looks like we've got the result of our query. So just to recap, the goal of this video was to backtrack on our initial Dockerized Postgres tutorial to show you how you can set a password for the Postgres super user, which is required if you're not using trust mode authentication, and B, we learned how to set a password for our newly created user, our Docker user, which we did by passing a password as an environment variable in our compose file, and secondly, by reading that environment variable from the DDL inside of our shell script. So that's it for this video. Again, please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions. For the next video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're actually going to be going over to the AdventureWorks dataset to explore a different use case for loading sample training data. This is going to be a much larger dataset, also using the DockerCompose model. And we're also going to explore using SQL tools and VS Code, which is an alternative to the PostgreSQL extension that we've been using in the last two videos.